Good evening. This is the March 27th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee. We are a committee made up of 7 members. Quorum is 4. We have full attendance this evening. Thank you all for coming. So I officially open the meeting. And once again, thank those of you that are here for coming. I understand some are back from Iceland. Some have some family challenges, and at least one is recovering from a hip replacement, so, who will remain nameless. So thank you all for being here. First order of business is going to be the review of certain minutes. I think some additional ones were sent to you, but if we could focus at the moment on the February 28th meeting minutes, which I think you're seeing for the first time, or we're commenting on them for the first time. They were sent to you earlier. So having perhaps had a chance to review them, are there any comments or questions or the like? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion to approve. Is there a second? There is a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? None? 2 abstentions? Ben and Seth?
Yep.
Thank you. Next meeting minutes are March 14th. Again, they've been sent to you in advance. Same drill. Any comments? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? 2 abstentions. Ben and Tim. On the agenda, you see that it includes March 6th. Those are not available at the moment, and we'll have those immediately, perhaps at our next meeting, which we're hoping will be next Wednesday. So, the next order of business, I hope you're going to allow me to jump all the way down for a moment anyways, to item 8 under new business. There was a reserve fund transfer that I sent to everybody. Was given to us in a timely way before this evening, but after our agenda was, meeting agenda was posted, I didn't see the need to revise the agenda and repost. I think it can be taken up under new business. You see it on the, I think you do. Do you have that, Jeremy?
It's loading.
There we go. So if I could dispense with motion second discussion, can we enter the discussion on the front end? I have everybody's blessing to do that. Heather, the question is, we know it's for legal services, and we know you're over budget. So the question is, what's occurring in that particular account that's causing you to go over budget? Not you personally, but the town.
Sure. So if you remember last year during budget season, we did talk about this was a collective bargaining year. And we originally were toggling with the number even higher. We ended up settling at 15.5, but I had originally looked at like closer to like 18 or so. I was concerned that we were going to incur additional expenses because we tend to rely on Labor Council for a lot of guidance and some of the assistance with writing MOAs and so forth. And that's what's happened here. The bulk of the bill we just got was collective bargaining related. We expect, this will cover that current bill, which was for the month of, what are we in now? We're in March, the month of February. We'll have the bill next month for March, and some of it will as well be for collective bargaining. Some of it will also be for the annual town meeting piece. And then at that point, we'll put us in May, and we'll be able to do year-end transfers, hopefully, for the last piece. We do have a little money that's left over in the tax title legal expenses, and I did speak with Donna Kuchar about that, who oversees that. We're waiting for some bills to come in from some of the properties she's been working with, so unfortunately, we can't really dispense with any of that money at this time until we know what we've incurred for bills there. There might be a little bit left at the end of the year that we can offset. But to summarize your original answer, collective bargaining.
But before the year-end transfers, is it likely you'll be back to us again for a reserve fund transfer?
Yep, we're gonna be back at least one more time.
Yep.
Because this is just to get us through the month's bill for February. I can't anticipate how much I need because I don't know what the expenses we've incurred are yet, until we finish getting through March and then have the bill sent to us. So as soon as we get the bill, we'll apply for a reserve fund transfer, because this bill, along with the transfer, will zero our account out.
In collective bargaining, at least on one unit, is still ongoing?
So the police unit, we are finalized, it looks like we're finalized, I think we're just waiting for signatures, but everyone's done their side of the approval on the memorandum of agreements this week. So we should be all set with that. We do have personnel contracts, a couple small ones that are out there, that we're still waiting on, so I don't know if those will go to legal. Sometimes they do, but those should be a small cost. They won't come to the same numbers that we're seeing when we do collective bargaining.
And everybody will take note that the reserve fund before this transfer has $28,914 in it from an original balance of $40,000. So, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? It passes. So, the good news is, and sorry to make anybody throw up when they first saw this agenda, there's a number of bullets there, and you might think, oh my God, we're gonna be here till 10:30 at night. I think that if you'll allow me a couple of minutes, I think we can get through about 8 of those bullets in a presentation because they overlap. So if you can just bear with me to kind of walk you through what it is I'm talking about. And it kind of starts in some part with, we've all heard about, or at least seen, I think the select board sent out a community-wide notice regarding override, and it's got varying reactions. And I think our task tonight is to try to quantify what that is. And if you go to a slide that I sent to Jeremy, and pardon my not sharing it with everybody, because I knew we'd see it on the screen this evening. This is just a reminder to you that this is kind of and I think I may have sent it to you. This is something that Heather sent today, but it's also an old friend that was sent previously, which was kind of operating budget-wise. What are we looking at here? And give or take, and I don't mean to be frivolous in terms of whether it's 700 or 800,000, but that is reflecting 761,000. And the ask of Heather a long time ago, and she's stayed with it, is what cost the override? I think that caught a lot of people by surprise. They didn't like hearing it, but the question is, what happened? And these were the budget drivers as we actually reviewed at our very last meeting. I think the footnote to this is that that's a working number, because even though there was an indication that police is nearing the end of their collective bargaining, that could have an impact on that particular number. So you're going to see in a minute, again, I don't want to be disrespectful of people's needs or concerns about the budget, but I'm going to use a number about 800,000, and I just wanted you to know, where did I come with that, come up with that number, and that's the genesis of it right there. So there's another slide that again, I think I shared with you or sent this same material to everybody on the occasion of Monday night's Select Board joint meeting. And this was a matter of some great discussion at that particular meeting. If you can scroll down right there. And that is, Heather was trying to say, what are we talking about in terms of an override? Is it just a deficit? Are we going to add back free cash? Are we going to add back ambulance receipts? I'm looking at number 2, A, B, C, D, E. Are we going to add back free cash and ambulance receipts, or is there another alternative? And what I'm hoping to do this evening for your input, your edification, but I also hope to walk out this evening with a recommendation to the board. I've tried to quantify and dollarize what does A, B, C, D, E mean. And I took it upon myself to come up with a schedule. Happy to say that it's going to be on the screen, but anybody that is .10 Word document visually impaired, I couldn't make it any bigger because I think I would have lost what it is. So I'm going to help you go through it. It's this one right here, Jeremy. Back.
I don't see it. I have one, two, oh, number 2. I got it. It probably is this one right here.
So, so here goes, if you can bear with me. If you look at the numbering down the left-hand column, you've got number 1, deficit only. We just left Heather's own email that said that. Number 2 was deficit and add back free cash. 3 was deficit and add back ambulance receipts. 4 was deficit and add back both of them, and 5 was other. And I took the liberty of coming up with some samples of other. So in to the right of it, you can see I've dollarized it. So what does the override mean if we just had an override for the deficit only? And we left free cash, which is currently inputted into our budget, and we left ambulance receipts, and that would leave us with a deficit of $800,000. Again, I'll mentally take you back to the earlier slide where we're working with 761. So then the next question is, what do we do if we add back free cash? And I want to give myself a hallway pass at the top that I'm rounding so that we don't drive people crazy in terms of, 1,000 or 3,000 or 2,000. So if we added back the free cash, which, don't hold me to this, but it's around 517,000, but I'm using 500, then the override ask would be $1.3 million. If we kept free cash in, but we added back ambulance receipts, which are currently in at 400,000, notwithstanding that there was another number shared at an earlier meeting, but what is in the budget and in that deficit number is 400,000. Then the deficit would be $1.2 million. If we added both of them back in, ambulance receipts and free cash, you may have heard of the number earlier, then the deficit becomes $1.7 million. We're getting to be a bigger number, and then stop at 5A, which is maximum. It has been suggested that we should go even further and have a override at 2,500,000. And what I'm suggesting, and I made the schedule, so I'm going to lead the discussion, is we got to be careful of going at some particular level where the override is so big that it doesn't pass, and then the ensuing cuts that are going to have to be made, some would argue, are even worse than the override. So as a suggestion of what some other considerations would be, with regards to 5B, the deficit is 800,000. I have long since, for 3 weeks, maybe a month, suggested that we add back $150,000 of free cash, which essentially is a catch-up for a financial management policy that we have, that over a 10-year period, we should rid ourselves of the reliance on free cash. And we missed the first 2 years, and that's why I have 30%. And 30% of using $500,000 of free cash would be $150,000. And then I'm suggesting, because I have other suggestions here, but in 5A, that we roll back the ambulance receipts, which currently are at $400,000. But the year before, they were at FY '23, they were at $350,000. So that's what PY, prior year level, is. We roll that back. Now our deficit and our override request is $1 million. We'll go one more step, and that is, some have said, let's take half of the free cash. Let's take that 10-year plan and let's do it in 2 years. So I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but that's what's reflected here. That would be $250,000. Put 100 in stabilization, keeping in mind we took 86 out of it last year. Put 150 in capital depreciation, which I'm going to go on record as saying we're going to need that in FY '25. Roll back the ambulance receipts to a $300,000 level, which was once the number. So that's 100,000. Then you have a deficit of $1,150,000. And D is for you to fill in. I think what we need to do, using this piece of paper this evening, I think we got to come up with a recommendation to the board as to what it is that we are going to recommend to them. Now, if you'll bear with me, Jeremy, do you think you can find this? It's under chicken scratch, but there it is. That's the 8-year analysis of ambulance receipts. Currently, it's 400,000. I alluded to another number being bantered around, and 460 was suggested this year. I just drew an arrow and a question mark, but that's not what's in the budget. A year ago, we were originally budgeted 350, and again, Fire Chief offered 400,000. The year before that was 310. The year before that, it was 300, and so on and so forth. So you can see that the low has been 300,000, the high has been 400,000, and the average has been 333,000. And you might want to know where I got this. I got it from the Finance Committee budget worksheets that we all used the last 8 years. I'm sorry I didn't throw it into a Word document, but I just want you to know that that was the source I used to come up with what I came up to. So I think it's, in that regard, even though you may not like the alternative recommendation, that's the source of the information that drove that. So now we need to go back to that page that we have those alternatives, and I think we need to open it up to this group to talk about what we want to make a recommendation to the select board, and I understand, Heather, that would be our charge, at least to go on record as to where we live, or give it to them as advisement. Maybe they have the final say, but let them know what we're thinking, because I think at the select board meeting, maybe I wasn't listening after 4.5 hours in the room, but I don't think the select board came up with an actual alternative as well.
I think I think number 4 was very close. I thought we were talking 1.6, 1.7.
What, is there a reason when we have these numbers why we don't talk about them in terms of the cost per household, something, because now that we know them.
Yep, you're right. Haven't calculated that number and don't know from the assessor's office what the impact is as well. You raise a good point, and that's where I stopped and did not do that. But
Okay, because these are just numbers.
it's a fair question to ask.
We did talk Monday.
Yeah.
You had a calculator.
Yeah, so, the calculator is actually on the web, so Jeremy, if we really wanted, Jeremy can throw it up and plug in whatever number everyone would like.
I'm going to say that I believe that when we were talking about the 1.6, 1.7 range, it was 1,100 per household average.
900, I think.
900, between 9 and 11?
It was 9.
I'm just gonna email you the link,
Okay.
Jeremy, because that way we're on precision, and then people can take a look at it. But yes, Mark, going back to your piece, I would agree that, the FinCom really should make a recommendation to the select board. The select board's next meeting isn't until next Thursday, because you guys have another meeting on Wednesday.
Right.
So they're actually meeting next Thursday. At that point, they'll have to vote for what the final number's gonna be, because it has to get to the town clerk by law 35 days in advance of the election. So it's due April 8th at 5 PM, and the select board meets on April 8th at 6 PM. So we had to do it a little bit sooner to make sure they get it in time. Jeremy, I'm just sending that, sorry, I paused to explain,
Okay.
and then I didn't hit paste. All right, so that's on its way over to you.
So just as a, as a footnote to Jeremy's good point, I think the discussion was leaning, select board discussion, 1.7, but I'm pretty sure I went on record as saying we didn't have a quorum, didn't want to get ahead of the finance committee, wanted to leave it to them to discuss. We're meeting on Wednesday, and here we are. So let me just add this one final thing. Only 6 short weeks ago, I was of the opinion that we should go for a big number. And I walked away and walked that back, and that's not my position right now for 2 reasons. I'm fearful, if not convinced, that a big number is going to fail. And I don't want to be in this room and have to cut $800,000 out of an operating budget. Number 2, I'm more and more convinced that a big number, which is what we were leaning toward, thinking, let's do a big number and we won't have to come back. I'm not convinced that we're not going to have to come back. So I like the idea if we think we're going to have to come back, which that's my position, somebody else can disprove that and say that we're not, then I think we need to be honest with people that we got a small number, the smallest one we can come up with this year, but we may be back next year because we know regional dispatch is going to go up. We know that Wachusett Regional is going to go up. We've got stormwater, roads, trees, capital needs, DPW building, water department, personnel retention. We got a lot of big issues that a big override this year is not going to take care of us for the next 7 or 8 years, which was the goal, because the last override we had was 7 or 8 years ago, so the hope was, okay, well, if we have one every 7 or 8 years, that's not the worst thing. I think a big one, we're still going to come back, and I think we're going to lose some credibility with the townspeople. Personal view, everybody's entitled to theirs, that happens to be mine. Can we recognize the public? Does anybody,
I just have a question or a comment. As you have these discussions, I don't know if everybody can hear me, but when you're talking override, would you explain to the townspeople through this meeting that that is a forever change. It's not like a deficit, like we bought the public safety complex that's on the tax bill for 10 or 20 years, but when it's paid off, it goes away. And I just think everybody needs to understand that whatever we're voting for,
Right.
1, 2, 3, whatever, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years,
Yep.
that changes the baseline of your your taxes on your assessed value forever. It stays with that property forever.
So you weren't on a microphone, so let me try to add to that and maybe even summarize. If we float a note for a 10-year truck, after 10 years, it stops. If you have an override, it's on your tax bill forever. And $900 could be affordable to a lot of people. It's going to be markedly unaffordable to low income, medium income, fixed income, but that's every year for as long as they own their home. So you're right, Neil. But we need to quantify it, but we have a little bit of a benchmark. It looks as if the $1.7 million is 900,000 for the average home. Keeping in mind that I think the average is what, 435?
459.20.
What number,
Yeah.
what number do I put in there, Heather?
Looks like it's 2,400 for the year.
It
You gotta
says,
have the right number of zeros, so 1, 7, then 2 zeros, and 3 more, so 5 zeros. There you go. There was one extra comma there, and it was putting me into panic mode. People were seeing it at home. I was going, oh, no, it's not that high.
yep,
They didn't know.
but that's 170,000. Oh, no, I'm
That should
sorry.
be 1
I got you.
million, 700.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm missing a zero.
Okay.
So that's saying, and we talked about the average home value, average assessed value is 459. So if you look at this column here, average assessed value, your property tax would go up from $72.3150 to $82.08, which is $976.50 for a $1.7 million override, year after
And,
year.
right, that becomes your new baseline.
It does.
Okay.
The only thing I'd say is, so Mark, I know you were mentioning you were guessing about 800,000 for the deficit. I would round it up to about 840,000 for the deficit. We do have preliminary numbers back for the collective bargaining as well as anticipated for the union, or the lieutenant in that piece. Mark is the chief is working on those numbers now, but I didn't want to spell them out yet either because we have that one contract that's not negotiated, so I didn't want to say where money is or the exact number. But I would say it's probably safe to round the deficit to about 840 instead of the 800. So up that number about 40K more.
So that makes $1.7 million, $1.740, which makes the 978 1,000,
999
999.
at $1,704,000.
I just want to make sure we're on real
No,
numbers.
we are, and I said earlier, I don't own the 800,000 because that even was a rounded number. So as we get closer, you're right. Here's my biggest concern, and I love nothing better than be proven wrong. No guarantee that we're not coming back next year. That's my biggest concern.
So I did have I've had a bunch of conversations with Austin, who's the town administrator over in Rutland. And remember, he wasn't there when Rutland originally came up with their plan or the number, or even, he walked in right around the day of the vote. But he said one of the lessons he learned over there was that we really, if you're going to go for a big number, you want the number to cover multiple years. So like when they were looking at the number they came up with, he thought was substantially lower than what they would actually need to prevent having to come back. They don't have to go back this year, but next year their numbers are already going to be very tight. But they did different things than we're looking to do, right? Like they were making up for lost time, so to speak, right? They had cut positions for so long, over so many years, they were trying to replenish those and add those to the piece. In our case, we just have a level services budget. We're just trying to fund a level services budget. And I very much understand your concern, Mark, and I think that's the concern of everyone, is making sure, whatever we do, we want to try to do it right the first time, so that we don't have to keep coming back, and we want to have a plan. I know this is still a little bit preliminary, but, I've been playing with different ideas, including, maybe having Select Board and FinCom look at a policy and say, okay, when we look at budgets next year, there'll be a cap for the school, a cap for Bay Path, and a cap for the town, and if any of those go up, whatever those cap numbers are, percentage increases, they would then have to go for their specific budget back to the town for those pieces to get approval to keep moving forward, because, as we know, there's no way anyone can stay within 2.5% anymore. It's just, it's very hard to do with budgets, and as school budgets keep growing even more significantly, it compresses everything else within that small period. But having something like that, and even slowly, as needed, adding those reserve funds back in from ambulance receipts, or even, free cash over time, it buys us a longer period of time. Otherwise, if we don't go with a high enough number, we're already going to be in the hole next year. Or if we use it, all of free cash, or even a portion of free cash and ambulance receipts, we're going to be in the hole next year. And the other thing with the free cash, just to keep in mind, is I know the plan was to get off of it in 10 years, but I don't know if there's an answer to get off of free cash for us other than doing an override to stop using free cash. Because it's our baseline, it has now built to be our baseline budget. So the only way to get rid of it would be to reduce services to be able to pull that money out. Otherwise, we're never going to catch up.
A better way to get away with free cash is budget better and not have any free cash.
Why is
Because
emergency services not an option? I'm just saying,
it could be.
we
Yeah,
we
it
talk
could-
about it like it's not an option, it's like, it has to be an option.
So-
I just can't imagine over the last 20 years that I can't imagine that we've perfectly implemented services, efficiently, and, there's gotta be some place where I don't know what it is, but it's like, we don't even talk about it. We just go right to the override I just wanted to put that.
Well, there's gonna be another option.
Yeah, there has to be.
There has to be, there does.
Yeah.
So can I just drop my last shoe here on number 4? The reason I don't like it is adding all the free cash back. Here's the deal. We have a policy to do it over 10 years. So why change the policy? Why have a policy if you're going to change the policy to do it all in 1 year? So I'm in favor of following the policy that we have on the books that has been voted on by the Select Board to do it over 10 years, and I'm advocating that we make it up for the 2 years we didn't do it. And Chief, forgive me for saying, but I think some of the ambulance receipts should come back to the town. Because we fund the ambulance and the staff and the vehicles, and it happens to generate ambulance receipts. So why can't the town share in the good fortune of that, which is not endless, but as far as I can tell, there's still going to be need for ambulance service. It could fluctuate a little bit because mutual aid is going to be up or down, but it doesn't make sense, and I'm shortening this, that the town incurs all the cost for the ambulance, but the ambulance fund receives all the revenue. I think there should be a revenue sharing, and that's why I don't think that it should all disappear. And that's what one of the 1.7 million is advocating. I'm not in favor of that.
So I think it's just important to remember that the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation, even though now we tend to use it to go back to the budget and offset some of our expenses for the ambulance program, the very initial idea for it, if I'm not mistaken, from the very get-go, was to establish this fund so you can put money back into the service you're billing for, right? So we bill you for the ambulance service when we go to pick you up, and then we take that money and we buy more things for the ambulance, right? We replace a Lucas device, we replace a cardiac monitor. We eventually buy a new ambulance out of it, so it doesn't have to go back to the taxpayer, so it doesn't have to come out of capital or anything else. So it's kind of, it's not 100% self-sustaining, but it, kind of funds itself. When we take that money and put it back to the town, there used to be a day where you used to have to look and calculate exactly how much money in wages you were paying to the ambulance side of the house and make sure that the amount you were bringing back into the budget from the ambulance receipts reserve did not exceed that amount, right? It used to be, you had to be that picky. DLS has had kind of relaxed things, you don't have to worry about that as much as you used to, but that was the initial intent, right? Is, yes, you're right, Mark, it's a revenue-generating service, but the idea is you still got to sustain the service, so you have to make sure you cover the cost to cover people, and you have to have stuff, because if you have no stuff, no ambulance, you're not generating the receipts.
Okay, so let me come back to that. If what we were doing here was to strip that fund of nothing, I lose my argument completely. But it still has a balance of nearly $500,000, so we're not bankrupting, and that's a bad choice of words, but it makes the point. We're not bankrupting the fund. If that's what the end result of this would be, that's a terrible suggestion. But they keep some, the town gets some. I think that's a fair trade.
So I think if I understand, I know the fire chief's here, so he can correct me if I go misstep on this. But as I understand it, we generally generate around 400, 460-ish a year in new receipts. So the 200 that was there is kind of carrying forward over the past couple of years. There were a couple of years where we did a lot of mutual aid calls to Worcester, right? And had high call volume on that piece. Over the past year or so, Worcester's kind of got their stuff together, and we're doing less and less mutual aid calls. So if we continue using 460,000 each year, that 200,000 we banked is going to keep decreasing.
We're not proposing using 460. In fact, I don't want to include that the chief mentioned 460, and we said, that's nice, but keep it, okay? So 460 isn't in play. 400 is, and for 8 years in the schedule, I stopped at 8 years. I could have gone back 15 years. For all that time, the town has benefited from ambulance receipts because of the good service that they get and the cost that the town provides so that that good service can be provided. Now, all of a sudden, we're saying we gotta go cold turkey and have none of that and pass on an override to the townspeople. That doesn't make sense to me.
I think the idea is we're just trying to get to a reset button, right, with the budget. We're trying to reset it back to using zero reserves. And in one way, you can think of it as using, as we go over the next few years and have to start increasing our ambulance receipts reserves again, because it's bound to happen, right? We're bound to exceed what we're continually making with that 2.5%, even keeping everything capped. We use it as kind of like a health indicator, right? And when we get back up to the number we're currently using, that lets us know there's an issue. But in the meantime, it also gives us a couple years to build the funds. We do, Chief, when's the next ambulance due to be replaced? In
2027.
2027.
Hopefully have a new one by 2030, based on bill.
So approximately 3 years, we're looking at needing to finance another ambulance. And this is also a nice opportunity to allow that to build. What's the current cost going for an ambulance these days?
We're looking probably about 500,000 for 2027.
So I guess in my mind, right, it's a nice opportunity, reset the clock. It allows us to build the ability to be able to take care of that ambulance purchase and anything else we need out of that. We're still going to be, by next year on my models, we're still putting money in, again, for ambulance receipts by the time we get to FY '26. It's a smaller than the 400 number, but it's there. And then it builds over the next few years. So that's the reset piece there. For the free cash side of things, zeroing it out makes sense to me for two reasons. Number one, we've been using this over a period of years, and I totally understand, Mark, that there's a policy that says we'll do this over 10 years. The problem is, I don't know how to stop reliance on free cash when we use it as the base of our budget. So without going for an override and saying we're going to use a different funding source rather than the free cash. The other thing is that because our budgets are getting tighter and tighter and tighter every year, we're going to generate less and less free cash to even be able to base on. So it's only going to be a matter of a year or two before the amount we're trying to reduce, we can't, because we don't even generate that much free cash to be able to do it. The other thing is, I know we have probably a difference of opinion on generating free cash, but the state and the auditors, and even when we go out for, having to go out for bonds or having to go out for debt service, they want to see a healthy amount of free cash because they feel like that means you're not living it to the tip of your means. And it's actually a financial health indicator to generate free cash. So if we stop generating free cash altogether, I think we're going to have more issues.
In free cash should go to stabilization and should go to capital depreciation. Both are woefully underfunded,
Totally agree.
totally underfunded. But my point is, do it in accordance with the policy that's in place. Why have the policy? Why put it in place? When we were putting it in place, why didn't we say, okay, in 2024, we're gonna go cold turkey? The argument was, we're gonna do it over 10 years because going cold turkey, because we've been so reliant on it for so long, is gonna cause a problem. And the problem is, we're passing it on to the taxpayers in the way of a 1.7, maybe more, $1 million override.
And
Yeah,
it's,
I have a question, though. So this is, as was stated, this is a reoccurring, so we're gonna go for this override, right? And it's gonna set, what did the budget go up this year by? So this is covering 800K of deficit.
yeah,
It's gonna replace free cash, and it's gonna replace the ambulance streets. Next year, you're gonna get that same 1.7 million, right? Because it's an override. We got that same
Yep.
1.7.
Adds to the base, yep.
Yep. What percentage do you believe the existing services will increase, just on average, over the
So-
last 3 years?
Yeah.
What percentage?
So I broke it out on my math. I was breaking into 3 categories. I did the school, Bay Path,
That
and
was
then
just
the
a whole
town.
number. We're just looking at 1.7 million, just a rough.
I don't know if I can tell you that number.
Well,
Hold
what did
on,
it go
maybe I
from last
can.
year? How about last?
Wachusett's gonna go up a minimum of 5.
Maybe I can.
Right, right, but if you look at those numbers, we're 800K down this year. So next year, let's say if we did the 1.7, we cover this year, and then let's cover another 300,000, 400,000 of additional increases. That means we're still plus 600,000 if we did the 1.7 million.
So if we,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, so I have it as, with my cost caps here, it's about $712,000 increase for next year.
For next year, okay, so that's,
year.
if we did 1.7 this year, that 800,000 covers it, so we'll have a 900,000 excess next year, right? Because free cash is full, ambulance receipts are full, 800K, again, this is just rough order of magnitude stuff, will cover any exchanges.
But I don't know how much,
So,
It's
this
still-
is just ballpark
Yeah.
talking here, so,
It-
but by increasing by 1.7, next year, we're gonna be in a windfall compared to what we've done before. And so, I'm kind of going back a little bit to Mark's point, if we put a different plan together that's, let's say it's a little smaller, you would still be able to fill up free cash flow in probably a year or two if you did the 1.2 million.
so I don't have that in my calculations, right? So when I did my this will be available to everyone next week once we get it vetted by finance people that aren't me to make sure I didn't mess it up. But when you're looking at it, so the number I just gave you for FY '26 was my projected increase of about $712,000. $413,000 is the estimated new revenues we'd have, and that's based on the higher tax base, right? With a 1 point whatever, actually, I think in this case, hold on. That was based on $840,000 as an override, so I could go up.
Okay, so
let
that
me-
just covered the deficit for the override.
Yeah, we would actually still end up with a deficit of $298,000. So we would already next year, if we just use that lower amount, we would end up having to use 298 of something to cover it. If you go with a high, this is just rough, please no one hold me to this, because this hasn't been vetted yet. So if you go 1.7 million as the override instead, right? So you're generating, next year you would generate an additional about $26,000.
That math doesn't seem right.
No, it doesn't. See, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's not
so-
vetted yet.
That-
Anyway, but you get the concept, right? Like, we're looking at the new revenues coming in, you're looking at the expenses going out, and you're trying to balance.
Just trying to figure out, because this 1.7 will continue to come in. So we're filling up again, assume the 1.7, you fill up cash, you fill up ambulance receipts, you cover the deficit for this year, great. So we're walking out of this year, full free cash, full no effective aim. Next year, we're gonna get another $1.7 million, right? Assuming no new income, assuming just maybe our standard 2.5, we won't need to fill up free cash, because that's full. We won't need to fill up ambulance receipts, because that's full. And you'll have $800K of budget changes. That just seems like a really big nut to take.
And I think one of the things that, again, now I'm putting my Joe taxpayer hat on. This is all awesome talk. If this is government. These are people. You've got to have an override that is palatable and effective, not just effective. You're going to have half the town that's going to look at 1.7 and be like, I can't do that. Let's keep some realism with these numbers. I would love to say we could do a 1.7 override. You have one shot at this.
And will that shoot us to the highest tax rate in the state? Property tax rate?
No,
Was it 22, on that, what you showed was $22 and,
our tax rate is right around the state, Heather,
Let's-
I said something we were looking at, it's like right around we're right around 7,600. That's the average for the state. The problem is our home values are so much lower.
right, but I think we're 46 now out of 300 and something.
That'll shoot
right?
us-
So we're gonna shoot to 1.
We're close to the average per state, but some of those that included in that equation, the home is 600,000, 700,000, and ours is 450,000.
So the state of Mass averages
So-
about that 76.
So you live somewhere else and you're paying the same taxes we are, but your average home is double ours or
30% higher.
Right.
Right, so our home value in Paxton is 30% lower than the state average, but our tax bill is exactly the same. It's average.
But Ben, and I want to get back to Tony's point, but Ben, Monday night, and we don't need to pull it up, and we don't need to review it, because it took 2 hours to go through a 47-slide presentation of the Wachusett Regional, but there was one page that their budget is at $121 million, keeping in mind that a little while back, we said, oh my God, this is gonna hit 100,000 before we know it. And they basically, afterward the meeting, they basically said that should have been 131 to 140 million. And that the increase is nearly 5%, 4.97. Well, right out of the gate, we can only fund 2.5% of that, so the other 2.5%'s gotta come somewhere. But they also said, the Vice President of Finance and the Chairman of the Business and Finance Committee both said that number is gonna be between 4.5% and 6.5% next year. So if you want me to put good money on whether or not it's gonna be 4.5% or 6.5%, I'm gonna put my good money on it's gonna be higher. So that's gonna eat into what you just said right now. And now we go back to Jeremy's point. I think we can sell $1 million override. I don't think we can sell $1.7 million override. Now, Tony's point is, can we make some cuts? And you can cut every single budget, for sure, Tony, there's no doubt about it. But as I've gone through the 48 cost centers, I could see, in some cases, $250 here, maybe $10,000 here, a deep cut, but I would never come up with 800,000. I think if I took out a chisel, it would be $250,000. So, and that would impact harmfully on those 48 cost centers, and we still fall short. If we could do that and make the 800 go away, I'd say, what's everybody doing Saturday, and let's roll up our sleeves and do that, but I just don't see it. We all have our favorites of somebody being overpaid, or they have this or they have that, but I just don't see $800,000 of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that there's not substantial cuts that people are willing to talk about or put on the table. So it's probably unfortunately not a worthy conversation, but I think there's things that probably could be looked at, but, it's not worth the time because we won't go there.
Yeah, in the end of the day, you're gonna have to have some type of override. It's just, again, you've got
No, there is. But
you gotta make it
Keep
palatable.
in mind, like what I said at that meeting on Monday, if somebody's making I don't know what an average salary is in Paxton, if somebody's making $120,000 a year, And again, the average raise, I think these days is about 1% in the public sector. This is, oh, I keep turning that off sometimes. This, that wipes out their raise. So that's it, it's gone. That's 100% of the increase that they got this year, just about, you know, if someone makes $100,000.
Right.
That's considering how much groceries went up. I think that's why you saw younger people, you know, showing up at the meeting, which you don't typically see, showing up on Monday, people who haven't been paying attention and now starting to say, well, you know, what this is, but I think to Ben's point too, you definitely do have to think about it in the fact that if it goes through, you have it next year, you have it the year after. But I guess what I was leading up to with that question was, when we're talking about next year, don't we have tons of like capital improvement projects? And isn't that gonna get all eaten up in things we just didn't even talk about this year? Replacing the DPW building, all those things, isn't that all gonna?
That service.
Well, the capital improvement planning committee, of which Neil is a member,
Yeah.
I don't know who else is, and Heather's a member, we voted unanimously against $500,000 of DPW needs, one of which is a 35-year-old dump truck whose average life is 10 years.
Right.
And we're going on our 35th year. We have a $25 million, not my number, and not one I would endorse, $25 million DPW building, which that's got to come down to be 12 million, 10 million, 5 million, 6 million, but that's still 6 million. That's a big number, for sure.
All right,
Neil?
just to follow up on that, but you're throwing the building in, that's gonna be a debt service thing. That's not gonna,
Yep.
all right, so, but I think you.
But the taxpayer is going to have to fund the debt service.
Understood.
For
And I just wanna.
40 years.
Right.
25 years.
That's correct. I wanna clarify one thing. DPW needs was your words. I looked at it as DPW requests. So there is a big difference between a need and a request. And I think that's why some of them were put under the microscope and the vote was not to pass them on.
Right.
Okay.
Don't want to relive that meeting.
Nope.
And you're right, it was unanimous. I'm just going on record, I think one of them's coming back. And that's the 35-year-old.
And I think to add to that, what Wachusett presented is gonna go before you. These are not things they're funding.
Right.
These are things they're gonna, so Wachusett is gonna request this year for Paxton, $150,000 to separate the white building from the school.
Right, right.
They wanna put in $1 million sprinkler system. So the FY '25 capital from Wachusett is 1.15 million. A lot of capital needs out there, it's just
I
not a
think
lot of
we have a
capital.
5-year project, 5-year problem. And, and I wouldn't want to go 2,500,000, 1,700,000. And then we get the cuts that you're talking about, Tony, because we're going to have to make, I think that'll fail. So let's try to get something that will pass. And we take a little of ambulance, we take a little bit of capital, cash, we put a little bit in capital improvements in case we have that emergency. That's why I kind of lean on, my fan favorite is 5B, $1 million.
Jeremy, would you put the calculator back up and punch in that 1 million versus we had 840 and we had 1,000,007, somewhere in there? Just so, again, people might be able to see what this is gonna do. So at
$576.
1 million?
1 mil.
Okay.
If you go, what was the other option?
Split the difference, do 1.4.
The difference is 1,350,000.
800.
So what's that, about $150 for another 400,000? Is that right? Doing that right?
All right, now, let's hit the home run. Put down 2.5 and see what that does, just so people have an understanding. And thank you for allowing me to ask the question.
1435.
Okay.
What actually gives it to you, Jeremy, on the 1.464, it tells you what the average
There you
is.
go. 1464.27.
So So using your math, Tony, that'd be a 1.4% raise.
Not with my.
And you're right, Tim, that would put you pretty near the top of the list.
Sorry.
Right, that's a tax bill of almost $9,000.
What's the annual budget total to run the town?
15 and change?
All
Between 15 and 16 million.
right.
Yeah, it's over this year will be over
All
16
right,
million.
let's round it up to 17 million, and if you're looking for 1.7, that's 10%. You're looking for a 10% increase.
That's the that's the amount of money you would need to cover the cost, right? So you would need the 1 million plus either the free cash number and the ambulance receipts number.
No, but I'm saying, if you're looking for an override, I just did 1.7. That's 10% of the annual budget is what you're looking to recap in 1 year.
But you have to remember, we didn't get there overnight, right? We've been using about give or take around $900,000 every year for several years between free cash and ambulance receipts reserved to balance the budget.
Understood.
So that's not the new numbers that have come.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying, when people are looking at cost of groceries and all this kind of stuff and raises and whatever, it's spiraling.
Yeah, I think, Heather, you make a very good point, but I think the average citizen isn't gonna say, oh, well, we've been doing that for 12, 15 years. They're gonna look at Neil's point, that 10%, and it's 900, 1,300, 1,400. That's a big number.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of people who'll say, whatever it takes, I'm in, and there's a lot of people, low income, moderate income, fixed income, they're gonna have a hard time with this.
yeah, but I think the other thing to put that 10% in frame is that we've gone through all our savings, right? That 10% builds up some savings back a little bit too, so.
Understood.
Whether you call it a rainy day fund or emergency fund or whatever, if something happens that we don't expect, we would be able to pull from that the following year. It's
Further discussion.
I think the biggest question is trying to figure out the pain point, right? What's the public's pain point? Now, one thing that I think is a little confusing here, I believe, is that 800K deficit includes taking, all free cash? It
No.
assumes,
Oh, taking it and using it.
yeah. So the so it's really, if we would say we wouldn't have touched free cash, where we would like to be, that'd be more of a $1.4 million deficit.
Well, it's number 2 on
Yeah,
your,
1, 3, 4.
yeah, number 2 on your list.
No, but I'm just trying to put it in
Yep.
context that it's really not an 800K deficit because we're pulling from free cash. The true deficit, if you want to keep free cash.
It's
1.7.
1.7, actually,
Right.
because your ambulance receipts.
Right.
But you said, what's the pain
Pain
point?
point.
If it's 500, you could say, that's $10 a week, okay? That's easier to sell than 2.5 million.
Oh, I think 2.5 million is probably beyond, but, looking at the difference between 1 million and 1.4 is $156.
Yeah.
That, $156 for the year.
So that's only $30, but it's $30 more on top of the.
Whatever the override is,
Right,
yes.
right.
But it gets us, one option is it gets us to a place where we can't hit the full extent of the ambulance funds, as you kind of said, why don't we do some sharing there? But we do get to fill up our savings, I guess is the way that I'm thinking about free cash. That's the D.
5D is still available on your screen.
Jeremy, do you have any input in terms of your palatable level? You mentioned that word. What you're gonna promote versus what's gonna be palatable. Do you have an idea?
Everybody's different. But me personally,
Well, no, yeah, you're a member of the board. You live in town. What are you hearing? it's interesting, because I had a
it's
follow-up.
exactly like Mark and Ben both said. You've got people who, if you ask them to double their taxes, they'd be all in.
Okay.
And then you have people, like you said, low-income, fixed-income people that don't have $30 extra a week. So, I mean, this doesn't seem to be a common, it's opposite ends of the spectrum. It's, I don't want anything, or I'll do anything. That's what I'd say it's about 50-50, what I've heard.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, are you or anybody in town tracking real estate sales? Because it'd be very interesting over the next 12 months, 14 months, to see if people actually, if they're not happy with whatever happens, they vote with their feet, and they decide to leave town, leaving some sort of gap, whether it's an older family that then moves out, and a younger family comes in with kids that impact the schools and other services. So I'm just,
This is this is the funny thing about, we talk about this when we talk about the Economic Development Committee. There's people in here who are completely fine with never seeing another piece of business in this town. They want it that way. I can drive 5 minutes to get to whatever I want. I like it quiet. I don't want to see traffic, red lights, smell gasoline at a gas station. And then you got people that want development, and it's just, they're so absolutely opposite. It's just,
Neil, to address your question on the homeownership, the overall average price of the houses in Paxton has gone up probably about 7% over the last 4 years.
over how many years?
Four.
Four, okay.
You know, on average, it's about 1.5%, 2%. On average, there's, you know, I sit on my phone at night and look at Realtor.com and Zillow.
Yep.
There aren't many houses for sale in Paxton. And when they go up for sale, they sell quickly. So relative to that, just some data, again, I'm not data mining, this is just what's out there. There aren't a lot of places for sale in Paxton.
But I think that's been a situation for the last 8 or 9 months because of, I mean, everybody's saying there's not enough inventory to sell, but I'm just saying, it's just a benchmark that you may see over the next year and a half.
you know what else you're seeing as a benchmark too? You're seeing in every newspaper you read that every town is looking at an override. Everybody's going through this.
Yeah.
It started last year when people were shocked when what happened in Dudley, right? And now everywhere. Today I saw West Boylston's looking at an override. Last year it was Rutland.
I'm not trying to be gloom and doom.
I know you're not going to, I'm just saying that it's just, where are you going to go? Where the taxes are any lower? I mean, you know.
Yeah, choose your poison.
Yeah, it really is, so.
Yeah, okay. But it's
And
just,
again-
it's something else that I think it's an undercurrent that you may not realize it's happening until it's happened.
I think that you have to, people have to realize what you're going to lose. Okay, it's not what you're going to give up as far as money-wise. What happens if this doesn't pass? What does the budget look like if you do not get this money?
All the more reason to have it at a level that it will pass.
And that's what I'm saying. So
Palatable.
where's palatable, right?
Right.
You've got to understand, the last thing that I think, or anybody wants is a cut in services, right? But at the same time, you have a cut, no,
I'm just saying from the people I talk to, like,
Okay.
I think that's the problem, is people are getting sick of hearing that. It's like, we haven't planned services perfectly in this town. We have overdone some things, we've maybe overshot the moon here and there, and I don't feel like we've had real discussions like that. I'm sorry. Keep doing some typing. I don't think we've had I don't even know what's out there, to be honest, at a very real level, because I just don't think we have we skip right over that, for the most part, and we just start with overrides, and we start with, what, hopefully the state bails us out and things like that. But, so I was just saying, the people I talk to, there's a lot of services they mention that think are overblown, and I don't want to get into the specifics right here, but there is an appetite for that, and there's a fear factor involved with it, right? If you talk about, that's what we hear is, we're all gonna die, the town's gonna fall apart. I don't know that that's actually the truth, I think there's things we could do more with less, like everybody's doing in their jobs right now, And so there's, I don't know that we can get into that today, but.
No, but can you opine a little bit just to tell the people watching this at home, if it didn't pass, what the consequences of that are, whatever the palatable level is?
Yeah, so we actually, so FinCom should have also had in their packet tonight, which no one's had a chance to look at, so I'm sure it'll be a discussion for next week. And it's currently slated for the Select Board's meeting on April 8th. We've worked with all the departments and everyone's worked really hard to say, okay, well, in the event that we can't get an override to pass, you know, what does it look like with reducing services? Still using 100% of free cash, yeah.
Your FY revised.
100% of free cash and 100% of ambulance, or the 400,000 for ambulance receipts reserved. We're able to do it, but let me tell you, it's not really pretty. What we did, and just, I'll try to stay
wanna
high
look at that?
level, Mark. What we ended up doing is we actually we started with all the small departments first, and we met with everyone and said, okay, well, is there anything we can do without? So we tried to take into consideration things that we're legally obligated to pay. We tried to take into consideration services we still have to provide, like regardless of how much we're doing, we still have to have a town accountant, right? We still have to have a treasurer. Like, these positions have to exist because we have business that has to legally be done. So we looked at those pieces. Once we got through all the small departments and we went through all of them, we then took the last of the bulk of it, right, which there was some left, and we divided it amongst the three big departments, because that's where our funds are, right? We don't have a lot in those tiny ones, or you have a department that's, you know, maybe 70,000 for the whole department, or, you know, the library's booming at 200, you know, as the next largest department before you get to the
Jeremy,
large ones.
sort ascending, so anything.
If you sort it, it's gonna go all kinds of wonky, because
Okay.
it's
These all
got
have
formulas
tabs.
based in the bottom, and
Okay.
also, I don't know if you can, it's locked on
It's
mine.
locked, it's
but-
not mine.
Yeah, that's fine. It would just have been an easy way to show, and most budgets are like this, right? It's probably 10 or 15 items that take up 80% of the budget.
Yeah, and again, Wachusett is a big,
It's the biggest.
That's 51%.
you're not, and that's not,
Yeah.
realistically, are you gonna get that down?
So remember, out of
But-
like approximately a $16 million budget, we could only actually touch 6 million of it.
Well,
To
one
mess
thing,
with.
yeah, but one thing to
With
think
what?
about is a lot of people move to Paxton because of Wachusett. Right? A lot of the young families that come to Paxton, a lot of the new houses that are sold in Paxton is because of the Wachusett School District.
So, but going back to Tony's earlier question, right? So we did do work on this. We also have a Word document that we're finishing up, Tony, that goes through every single department that would have any impact. And you actually see a side-by-side comparison, kind of like a brief bullet point of, you know, what's the staffing look like? What's operations look like what am I actually getting as a taxpayer? What service is this department, or would this department be able to provide me based on this level of funding?
And you have to present, you really gotta present that at town meeting, because
Right.
you gotta, if you're gonna make a choice, you gotta know what your choices are.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you would make up the deficit by cutting services, I'm just saying.
No.
You might be able to
And I-
eat away a little, and again, I'm not just using it as an example, like, looking at the bigger departments, like, if we have 3 open positions for police officers, could we survive with 2? You know, and then I'm using that as an example, I don't even know if we have 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever, but those are things where if an override doesn't pass.
Speaking, just to answer quickly as the department head here, and working with Heather through this for the last, I'll take the microphone, so we can hear it.
I've only been back a month.
Yeah,
the
it's been about a month, so it's been a heck of a month. So just to kind of give you a brief update of what the fire department would actually look like to absorb what was about a $266,000 cut to our budget. That'd be 2 full-time jobs that are currently staffed. That is an ambulance crew. So we would actually lose 2 days of ambulance coverage. The other side that would take a hit is the call side.
Wait, but so I don't mean to stop you, but we wouldn't literally just have no ambulance service. If I called 911, there would be an ambulance.
No ambulance for 2 days on a rotation.
Right, but it would come from somewhere. I'm not
It
saying
would.
that I would want to do that. I'm a
So-
former paramedic myself.
So you would,
hypothetically-
you have the benefit of having an ambulance to your door within 5 to 10 minutes
Right,
right
right.
now. It would take about 20 minutes, if you're lucky.
And the
So
state would be okay with that.
No, we would actually probably be in jeopardy of losing our ALS license. So then we would lose about a third of our billing capabilities. So,
Yeah, I don't want to drag it to
and,
zero.
and, you know, I understand what you're saying, but there's a reason why we provide so much mutual aid sometimes.
Right.
The services around us are pinched. Staffing levels are an all-time low throughout the state as far as EMS is concerned. So we get dragged everywhere. Every service gets dragged everywhere. There's plenty of times, and Sean Mead, who's behind me here, he's our union president. They'll have more information on this too in the month coming. Everybody's pinched, so I'm going to tell you 20 minutes for an ambulance. I can't get one out of the city if I need an ALS ambulance right now. It just doesn't happen. I can probably get one from Leicester, I can probably get one from Holden, but most of the time, those guys are always on the road. They're moving, they're shaking. Same with Rutland. We had to go to Rutland the other day for a car accident, we had to provide an engine, just because they had no staffing in-house. They were out on medical calls. So reverse that and take ours away, kind of leaves us stripped. And I'm not doing this as a scare tactic, this is just facts. My purchase services decimated, and I need that to keep the ambulance running, licenses. Equipment would be decimated, supplies are 16,000. I've kept this level funded, a little bit of cuts the last 2 years. Last year I cut 56,000 on my proposed budget. I am razor thin this year, and I will be surprised if I don't have to come back for a reserve transfer at the end for payroll. Call side of the department, I'd probably be left with about 7 call members, and they all work during the day. So, take a house fire during the day. If I don't have an ambulance, I don't have fire staff, I don't have 2 guys on. I don't have anybody in the house, it's just me, an engine, water. Hopefully we don't have an issue. If no one's around because they're at work during the day, I got no one. So that's the reality, and we're trying like heck to make that not happen. Sean and I are constantly working numbers. We're constantly working with Heather to try and do the best thing that we can here to provide the services if we have to reduce it, but that's the actuality. I have no fluff. It's been eliminated since I became chief, and I think you guys have seen that year in, year out, so. But that's the reality. That's what we're looking at. So we'll see how it goes. And I'm not here to sway you one way or another. It is what it is.
No, it's just.
And I'm a
not-
taxpayer.
Yeah, ever since I've been here, it's always been, you're either for the police, you're for the fire, you're for the school. I think we can all, that seems very all or nothing to me.
And it's good to, I mean, again, you know here's what your tax bill will be with override.
Right.
Here's what the fire chief says is gonna be your service level without an override.
Right.
And there's.
It just still doesn't add up for me that it's like, if there's no override, we go straight to that number. Isn't there like an in-between and you go back for another override that's smaller?
Well, and I think that's the thing to keep in mind, right, is, Jeremy, you alluded earlier, probably because I mean, I've alluded as well to Dudley, right? We want to learn lessons from Dudley. We don't want to do that because you get to the point where you have to lay everyone off, and then you try to rebuild departments afterwards when you finally get something to pass. It's not a pretty sight, and not something that's entirely workable. But yeah, so we can, there's nothing that says we can't go back and ask for a different number or try something different if, the first one doesn't work. I think overall what we're trying to do is say this would put the town in the best position possible.
Right.
By cleaning up everything. Even, to your point, would it be right to cuts if we override fails? Well, kinda, yeah, because we are already using 100% of our free cash. We're using, at least 400,000 in ambulance receipts reserved. We only have like 200 and something left in operating stabilization, and that's our emergency fund. So like if something crazy happens, we're gonna be going out for some version of an override.
Right.
Capital or otherwise, because we won't have enough money to cover it.
Right.
I mean, 200,000 would barely get you a roof if you were, a crunch, depending on the size of the roof.
Yeah.
So, I got one point and then one question. The point is that if I'm going back to maybe something I said 40 minutes ago, if it's too high, it fails. And if it fails, we have devastating cuts. And the intangible of the devastating cuts is when you make the cuts and you hope that your good people stay, your good people leave. And I can't describe what impact that's going to have on all the various departments. So I'm asking Jeremy, if we look at 5C, what is $1,150,000?
674.76,
674.76.
less than $2 a day.
So my fan favorite was 5B, but I didn't get much reaction from that, so I'm moving just for a minute to consider 5B was mine, 5C, which is half of free cash. If, you want to do it 1 year, I want to do it in 10 years, someone's got to be happy that we're doing it, half of it in 1 year, and then we go all the way back to maybe 5 or 6 years ago with the ambulance receipts all the way back to 300,000.
But
And
just,
that gives us 1,150,000 as our number.
but just keep in mind that, we might think we're doing great with the free cash and reducing it to 250, but next year we may not certify another 250 for free cash, right? So as I showed in my projections last meeting, the tighter and the tighter the budgets get, and the higher we estimate the revenues, we're giving ourselves less gap to be able to bring those numbers in.
Totally get it, so I'm gonna do your higher and higher. The higher and higher we go on the override, the less likely it's gonna pass, and then we got the cuts. That's why I keep coming back to something, whether it's the pain point, the price point, or the breaking point. I'm trying to get it a little lower
We
so
wouldn't go
that it
straight-
doesn't fail.
We wouldn't go straight, that's what I'm trying to understand, we wouldn't go straight to the level of cuts like Mike just laid out, right? It's more like, that's worse, you're laying out the worst
No,
case
if-
scenario,
if-
right?
No.
If
But-
the,
June 30th.
Right, but I'm
Right-
just, so. if
right
the-
now-
Yeah, go ahead.
the $840,000
That's what I wanted to
of
understand.
cuts would be if an $840,000 override fails. So anything more than, like,
there's
at
not
the
gonna
very
be a s-
minimum, if we went for the minimum of just a deficit of $840,000, and it fails, then we're enduring those cuts, because those cuts are already being supported in the budget by the free cash, by the ambulance receipts. That's 840, we just don't
So
have
it's that
anywhere
full level of
else.
cuts he just laid out. Okay.
Yeah.
Neil?
Just a follow-up question. The other night, when the select board had their meeting and you didn't have your quorum, there was a lot of discussion at one point about one question or two questions. So to support your thoughts or statement that people move to Paxton for Wachusett, Wachusett is part of this $840,000. And there was bantering back and forth about should we have one override, should we have two, and they didn't want to pit the town against the school and this and that. But you haven't got to that discussion point yet tonight. I heard it was going to wait until we got here, so I'm moving the motion.
Yep. So the point is that, let's assume it's $1,150,000, for the sake of argument. Is that one override number, or do we have a town operating override and a Wachusett Regional School District override?
And what are the
And
numbers?
And the board unanimously advised or opined on one override.
The board, but that's select.
I was in favor of two separate ones, and my argument was, there are people that are zealots and strong supporters of the school system, and though there are those that are challenging it. I think we should give each of those groups the right to vote the way that they want to. If we put it in one, we've taken that voting right away from them. I don't want to put words in Jeremy's mouth, but I think he might have had a different position. But mine that evening on Monday and mine this evening tonight is to have two overrides.
And what are the
One for the
numbers?
operating, one for the school. Keep in mind, 7 years ago when we did this override, we had one for the operating and one for the school. I think we should continue doing that.
Yeah, I'm in
The
I'm in a different
increase for the
place.
town of Paxton this year,
Was
You want
what,
one?
476?
327,
don't have
740.
a town with
So you're looking at roughly
But-
40% of your whole,
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna add one caveat. So the thing you don't see there, right, that's the whole number, that includes the debt. Remember, we talked a little bit last meeting, the debt's excluded. So
Okay.
you'd really wanna go back in and recalculate what that difference really is, because it's higher.
right here? No, that's minimum local.
No, so you wanna see what just their number is before the debt. I don't know if you can break it out in that piece. What the full number is before the debt from last year versus before the debt for this year. I guess Jeremy, you can probably pull it up on the master spreadsheet to show it. Because, yeah, I go to expense details, next tab. And then down to 300, or 300. Yep, red, Wachusett assessment. So if you see that right there, so last year's number, the Wachusett assessment was 7,256,812. And then this year it's 7,698,260. So it's 6%, a little over 6% increase. It
So
only looked
440,
like,
441, 448.
yeah.
So it's half.
So it's a little
half.
more than half.
Thank you.
Okay. So the reasoning would be if you wanted to split the two and have an override for Wachusett or having a separate override for the town.
Yeah, I think it's a little different, though, because free cash, our true deficit is 1.4, 1.3.
Fair enough.
So this is a quarter of it. Our true deficit, right? So one thing I think that we have to think about is our job as the finance committee is to make sure that the town has free cash. Our recommendation should be, right? It's kind of like being a CEO, right? You want to make sure that you have your reserves for just in case things happen. So part of the view that I have is that it's part of our obligation that to make sure that we fund our savings account, our free cash flow, whether it's the 10-year plan that everybody came to agreement, whether it's can we do it a little bit more, but that has to be a big piece of, in my opinion, the recommendation of this group, because that's our responsibility to the town. You know, we have the responsibility of the people, but that's our responsibility, a fiscal responsibility.
And I think a part of looking at those different numbers, whether you say 1.7 or 1 or 1.1, this is the time where you really got to choose, don't let perfect get in the way of better, right?
Yep.
1.7, perfect. Can we take better at this point? Because there's just so many moving pieces.
Well, I think that has to be articulated to the town is,
Yeah.
this is ideal. 1.7's ideal. We cover everything. However, that's going to increase your payment by X. This is our minimum recommendation. We fulfill the deficit, we fill up some of the free cash, we do this. This is our recommendation. So we're not being perfect, we're not hitting everything we need. We understand it's going to be painful for people, but we have to run a town, we have to put ourselves in the best position. And that, in my opinion, that should be the message.
Is that a motion for 5C? Neil.
Not being a member of the board, but I'm thinking outside the box, and I don't know if.
You're a
this-
charter member tonight, Mr. Bagnis.
Well, all right, well, so I'm about to put something on the table that I don't want to be divisive in any way, shape, or form. So, I'm not trying to bring back something from the dead, but, living in town, and I think you know where I'm gonna go here, because I talked with the fire chief the other night. But, okay, we have placed an order, signed a contract for a new fire truck for roughly $750,000 that is coming out of ARPA funds. Now, if we were able to reverse or rewind that pay schedule and put the ARPA money on the table and refinance the truck as a debt for whatever, 10 years, I believe the numbers that were discussed going back were somewhere between $50 or $60 per household. Would that $750 allow this deficit to look different?
I think it would. Jeremy, do you have that opera?
You understand what I'm asking
Yeah.
for here?
Well,
In
I
other
think
words,
the point is
the
that-
chief explained it to me, just so I want to clear, but he explained it to me, we signed a contract with the supplier,
Yeah.
that the truck was being funded by ARPA money. Well, what I'm asking for is no different than if I go to Sunnyside Ford and I buy a Ford and I say I'm going to finance it through Ford Credit, and by the time the truck comes in, I say, oh, I got a better rate from my bank, so here's your check, I'm paying in full, there's no changes to it. But instead of using Ford Motor Credit, I'm using my local bank or credit union, and then they don't get the extra spiff on doing Ford Motor Credit. Well, if you here,
Some-
no,
some
take,
on that?
yeah, Here.
I'll stand right here. Thank you. I'll go up to, okay, face everybody. I like talking to everybody face to face versus from.
Come on down.
Hello again. So, Fire Chief Mike Minitori, for those of you that missed it earlier. Neil brought up a good point. We funded a truck with ARPA back in March of '22. Contract was signed in March of '22 by the Select Board at that time. There will be financial penalties to try and get out of the contract. And I know what you're saying, we're going to try and find another mechanism to finance this. One of the big reasons we did that with ARPA, and at the time when I was approached by the Select Board then to put that project forward, is the fact that we didn't have to borrow the money. Now, remember, this was March of 2022. Interest rates were much lower. After the money was borrowed on a 10-year note for that truck, the town was looking at about $144,000 extra in interest. Compound that with 2024 interest, I'm not sure where we lie as far as municipal borrowing. I think it's 4 or 5%, right? So you're going to double that. So it's not 750, it's $1 million after the truck's bought for in 2024. Right now, $750,000, no cost to the taxpayer. The debt service will be a cost to the taxpayer. This is why we did it this way. This is why the ARPA committee voted on it. I think and it's also a purchase with that ARPA money that affects everybody's home. It affects your insurance rate, not just the people outside of the hydrant district, because it's a combination engine tanker. And it's a 30-year problem solved. That's how long these trucks have to last us in Paxton.
Well, you only got 28 left now.
That's,
When's it coming, by the way, Eddie?
I don't know. Early 25, but now with the bridge collapse in Baltimore,
Yeah,
who
no
knows,
doubt.
right?
I hear
Because they're saying that's going to affect shipping and
Yep.
parts and stuff for the truck. That's the hope. The other problem is, and we've talked about this extensively.
Yes,
on
we
the
have.
deal, and I appreciate the thinking outside the box, because, like I said, you weren't the only one to come to me with this. If I could, I absolutely would, and that truck was to, start the improvement of the capital process. And what it does too for you in this town is it takes 2 trucks and it gets rid of them into 1 truck. So we're
Right.
reducing our capital footprint altogether.
Right. Michael, can I understand where you're going, and I'm not saying don't buy the
Right.
truck.
No, and I'm
We-
not saying that
All right.
that's the case.
But what I'm saying is, to do an override, that raises everybody's taxes forever.
Mm-hmm.
If we took on a 10-year note, whatever that, if it's $1 million or $750 or $850, whatever it is, it goes away in 10 years.
I get that. I absolutely do. Problem is if it gets turned down at town meeting,
But we're still on the hook. We're buying the truck.
it's signed, but if we go to town meeting warrant, it has to get voted on by the taxpayer then, to borrow that
To
money.
put the,
Do it the way that you don't lose the truck. Again, I don't know.
that's what I'm saying. I'm asking that it be put on the ballot as a question to say, can we do this? We bought the truck, and I'm not saying take it away. You're entitled to it. I think you've done a lot of planning. I'm giving you A's on all the way across the board for that. I'm just looking, because we're in this financial situation, I stepped outside the box.
No,
and I
I-
looked at this and saying, okay.
We all
take
appreciate that.
A 10-year note versus a forever note. Because
It's-
once the taxes go up, they're there. That's your new baseline.
The other problem too is with the contract. The contract does have ARPA language in it.
Understood, but.
So we'd have to look at that. Now, to buy this truck today without borrowing the money, cash price is around $1.2 million.
But we have a contract.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm
We
not
have
asking
provide
to
the
break
money,
the
so-
contract.
I know, and so.
But I don't want people to get confused. I mean,
Nope.
we're
The-
talking apples and
The
oranges.
other problem that this compounds with is, it's a one-time solution again. It puts us back into the situation next year with the $750,000 that we're talking about. And I get it, and
Okay,
I just want people to know the facts before we do anything.
Right, but I don't want the scare of, we have to renegotiate the price and it's now $1 million.
I don't know, though. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just giving you the facts, and a lot of these I don't know, because I have not looked at the 148-page contract in a
Okay.
while. But I do know that it is contracted to be built, it's signed, and I know there is a financial penalty.
We're not trying to get out. We want the truck, we're gonna pay for it, $750.
But yeah, we still got a long way to go, so.
Right, and I don't know if this is finance or this is, I'm just starting here, because if you could
I
take that
understand.
money back.
Any other comments to that? So, Mike, I would just want to correct one thing. You said the way you've done it is no cost to the taxpayer. I think what Neil is saying, and I'd piggyback this, we made a commitment to buy it, you signed a contract. We're not suggesting, I don't believe Neil is, and I'll partner with him right here. We're not suggesting you break the contract. What we're asking is, given the financial plight here, is there a way to still get the truck and pay for it differently? That's the issue, because when
Okay.
you say it's not costing the taxpayer any money, if we use that 750 for wastewater, which 135 of it was spent for wastewater, now the wastewater is sitting in the DPW budget, which is adding to the deficit, which is adding to the override, which is adding to the taxpayer paying for it.
No, and I just wanted to give you guys the facts behind it. So I'm not, I don't want to campaign one way or the other, because it really ultimately isn't my decision.
Right, but let me just finish. I think what they're saying is there a way, and probably and we're already over budget in terms of our legal budget, for this to go to town ballot saying, we've committed to the truck.
We're buying it.
We're buying it. There's no walking back from buying it. Would you like to use opera funds, or would you like to float a debt? And the debt is X and so and so. Let the townspeople decide. And someone's gonna say, well, CIPC was in favor of it. They were.
Yeah.
We put it forward to the select board as a warrant article for the townspeople to decide. That's not what happened right here. So now that we're committed to it, let's honor that commitment. But is there a way to still get the truck and do something a little differently? And
no,
maybe
that's fine.
put some relief on the deficit that we're incurring? I think that's all we're saying.
No, I get it, and I just like I said, I wanted to give you guys the facts, what led to that purchase from ARPA.
Right.
And so you have it, and then,
And legal counsel could say, you can't do that, you're too far down the road. That's fine, that's fine too. We've had the conversation, that's all.
So I think it could, Carol, you want to go first?
I just want to say, I think we're not being fair to the chief to put him in this position, and there's a mechanism that would have to take place to revert and to do what you want to do. So I'd like Heather to explain exactly what that's all about. I think that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do my best, but if there's anything I'm missing,
all right, well,
please jump in.
thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chief. So, I guess a couple.
Well, by the way, we didn't mean to be
Oh, no,
unfair.
and I didn't mean to come off
Okay.
that way, I just
No.
kind of wanted to give you the facts before we get
So first, let's just make sure that everyone understands the procedural piece, so we're all on the same page, right? So when it comes to the town warrant for town meeting, as well as the ballot box, it's up to the select board as the elected officials of the town to decide what goes on and doesn't go on. So some towns will actually have a lot more things get proposed to them, and some towns, generally speaking, everything that comes before usually goes on. That's usually how things work here for the most part. But it is up to the select board to decide what goes and what doesn't go on it. The second thing is, we've already been through the ARPA piece. It's already been appropriated and so forth. It would incur very likely higher increased expenses because you have the interest rate, all those other pieces that are part of it. The other thing, and the chief alluded to this as well, is number one, you're still $100,000 in the hole. And number two, now you have even a bigger deficit next year because you haven't actually fixed the deficit, right? We're still at the exact same spot we are. We're just saying, well, that's tomorrow's self to deal with, not today's self, which isn't really fair to the town because we know it's a problem. We're not actually fixing it. We need to fix the problem. Carol, is there anything else? I bet I missed something.
No, you're correct in what you're saying, but also just the mechanics of doing what you want to do. Because you'd have to change all your budgets and everything. You'd have to put a ballot question on for the debt, and then you just have to have a ballot question for the override. You'd be playing with lots of different spreadsheets. I don't think we'd even be able to get the information across, and there's a chance that we wouldn't have the buy-in from the town for the override eventually. So I think we're just going down a lose-lose situation, and like Mike said, you'd be in this situation next year anyway, so, and you'd be paying for debt and a fire truck in addition, so, but
I'll take
opinion.
Mr. Baggus raising the question as spirit and well-intended. Have a discussion, is it possible? If it's not, we'll move on, but I think you were motivated, and I chimed in to be your partner on it, to try to find a way to dumb down the override. Is this a way? It's $750,000. If it isn't, and we're committed to it, then I'm happy we have the discussion.
All right, I just want to follow up with that. Just, it's my understanding that if we do the override, as I said, that's forever. If we do a 10-year debt, at some point, that comes off the books. So yes, it may cost us more to do that, but at the end of 10 years, it reverts back. It's gone. So in terms of the burden on the taxpayer, and I'm not saying we don't have to do it, but the override is a forever burden.
But the problem is that, you know, and this is what, someone else had alluded to this earlier, right? Every town is currently, seems to be either having just had an override, facing an override, or they're doing one next year. It's not going to stop the permanent increase of the taxes at some point, Neil. It's just gonna put it off for a year. Because you look around, right? So in our district alone, it looks like the other 4 towns are gonna skirt by this year, and all of them, or 3 out of 4 of the others, are like, we're on the docket for an override next year, we can't sustain. If you look at the news, if you look at, you know, any of the listservs, like I've got 3 things on overrides this week alone, on just the small town listserv, right? Like, I was on the phone with Ashby earlier, walking them through what they need to do for the articles and so forth, right? This is something that everyone is facing. It stinks. And you're right, it is permanent and it's unfortunate, but everyone's facing in every town because there's not enough money to pay to continue having the services we have. And yes, there's the alternative, which is, you know, we do a reduction budget, but unfortunately that cuts almost everywhere. And it would not look the same for services that people are getting today that they'd be getting tomorrow, and that's probably not gonna make them happy either. So I hear you, but I think that's why we try, and that's why FinCom exists in the first place is, right? We're supposed to go through each of these budgets and look at them very frugally and make sure that we're spending and respecting the taxpayers' dollars and making sure that dollar goes as far as humanly possible. And at this point, we've used 100%, pretty much 100% of all of our reserves available, and we've said, okay, now we're stuck. Now we're at the point, we've tried everything we can. You know, we can look at reducing things, but we run pretty lean on all the budgets as it is. Reductions are gonna be reductions in services at this point.
Okay, just to follow, I'm just saying that it's just
We
a
gotta
way to
move on.
maybe start to reset the needle. If, yes, it's for 1 year, and then all of a sudden we have to revisit it next year. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm gonna help you out here a little bit. You've done a great job in terms of finding grants and monies that can be used in this town for projects that we were paying for years. So, and I have faith that you will continue to dig through every application or every source to try to find something to help us continue to conduct business in a way that the citizens of this town expect. That's all.
Okay, so
That's
let's
all.
go back to this.
So I was
looking for somebody to-
5D.
I know everybody's reluctant to do this, but here's the deal. We gotta pick something on this page, number 1, and that could include 5D, which is you got your own idea, and then we gotta decide whether or not that number is gonna be 1 or 2 overrides. Those 2 decisions are gonna be made before we leave this evening.
So Mark, just to clarify, so just make sure everyone knows, at this point, the select board's vote on Monday was that it's going to be 1 override. So the select board would have to modify their prior vote, not to say it wouldn't happen, but remember, just a recommendation of FinCom, and it's the select board's ultimate decision on how they want to proceed, because it's their warrants by law as well as the ballot question that's set by them.
I didn't see that as a formal vote. I thought it was a discussion waiting for what we would recommend under an advisement clause back to them. But if they've already decided, I think we
believe
can still
could
take
do
a
it.
vote, but they've taken
Let's
their
vote.
vote, so. But we need a vote on what the number is.
Well, Want to go around and make everybody say what they think?
Say again?
Do you want to go around and make everybody say what they think first?
Yeah,
Roll call.
no, I mean, everybody can pick a door, but at some point, someone's got to make a motion to vote on one of the doors.
I mean, if I had to pick right now, and based on, I mean, what the info that Mike gave earlier, which I wasn't in tune with, was how deep his cuts and immediate would be, you know, something like that. I'd land on 5C, like the 1.15. That's where I would be. I know everybody loves to follow my advice. But that's where I would start.
I would second Tony and say 5C.
Anybody want to comment? Tony, is that in the form of a motion?
I can make it so.
Yep. Is that a second?
Yeah, then I'll open it for
And
discussion.
we have a motion and a second discussion on 5C.
Yeah, so my one thing is, I guess then we would have to, the recommendation would be 5C, and then the message to the town is that the intent is to get our free cash back in place, which would take a few years, 2 years at this rate would be the goal, 5 years.
Well, you're building it to half, right?
You're building it to half, but again, you're gonna there will be a little bit more
Yep.
every year, but it will be diminishing returns as other expenses increase. So, and that's the problem, I think, with any plan that exceeds 3 years in any type of plan is you can't account for inflation, you can't account for price of goods, you can't account for anything like that. So we say it would be 5, but who knows? Eventually, we would have to go back. So I would probably go more for the 1.4, but, you know, I wouldn't be against the 5C.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We're going to put it to a vote. All in favor of what has fondly been regarded as 5C on our sheet here, at $1,150,000 as the override number. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Passes unanimously. $1,150,000. Shall we put it to vote for 1 or 2, or is that an academic exercise?
I think it would be academic. I mean, the FinCom's welcome to make the recommendation to the select board, but I believe they've already voted on it on Monday, so they would have to reconsider their vote and make a modification. And the fire chief has his hand up.
I just want to ask a quick question on the 2 questions, so I'm educated. If we went to 2 questions and
It would be 2 overrides, right? Is that what the vote was for?
2 overrides,
Town or town and what?
just school, yeah. So, town passes, school doesn't, the other 4 towns accept the school budget.
Yep.
Where are we gonna fall?
We eat it.
Is that gonna negate our override on the town?
Pretty much.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and I think that's why, Carol can correct me if I'm wrong, being one of the select board members, but on Monday, they did have extensive discussion about, should it be 1, should it be 2? Talked about, all of the cuts right now are impact, there'd be cuts that would literally impact every department. The school is a huge part of our deficit. It's not all of the deficit, but it is a part of the deficit. So it made sense to bring them in on that. And put everyone on the table, and one of the debates on having 1 question or 2 questions is sometimes when you have 2 questions, it pits one against the other, and sometimes neither pass, and sometimes only one passes, and then it puts us in the predicament that the fire chief had just stated. So I think that was a little bit of the rationale. Did I miss anything, Carol, on that? Does that sound about summary?
I think the other big thing is the fact that if 4 towns vote, we have to
Doesn't matter.
pay it, period.
Right.
Doesn't really matter.
Have we split it in the past?
We,
Is the reason out why we split it because one was really offset compared to the other one? So if like the Wachusett one came back way high and the town was pretty much flat, that's why we split it?
So there is, if anyone's bored, and maybe it's just me, but
Oh.
Division of Local Services Gateway, I can always send a link out to Mark and he can send it from there. So there is a link you can go to that'll actually show you the history of all overrides, whether it's capital debt or just, operating budget. It doesn't always say, you have to read what the override description is, but it tells you if it's a win or a loss. It tells you yes votes, no votes, the fiscal year it happened, and the specific date of the vote. So it gives you all the ballot question information. It also tells you the amount, right? So the smallest one we've had since they've been keeping track was in 2003 to fund a portion of the operating budget for first responders and the amount of $340. And that one won. It was close, though. It was $495 to $388, believe it or not. The largest one we've had was $400,000, and that was funding the Wachusett Regional School District assessment. That was for fiscal 2016 on February 11, 2015, and that was a loss. 88 yes, 214 no. And then the one below that, the largest one we have is $300,000 to fund Wachusett Regional School assessments, and that was May 14th, 2018 to win. I don't see maybe the general budget's there, I just have to go search. It's a lower number, I bet.
It was 400,000, 300 was school.
Yep. Yes, here it is. 100,000 fund operating budget, win 219, yes 219, no 151.
So can I just shift and maybe direct this to Carol? My big question, which is an academic vote, is why 7 years ago did they split it, and this year they voted for one? Because the same risk to 7 years ago of it failing, so you had the same situation and they opted to split it. So what's the difference then to now?
So, my reasoning at the meeting, which you was at, was that the superintendent informed us that he would be there for our meetings to pass the question. So, with his support, I thought it was only fair to combine them. That's what I said at the meeting, and that's what I'll stand by. In the past, we as a town, we used to put a contingent on the Wachusett budget to pass for Twin Off, and it often failed. And that sent the message to the school, along with another town, to revise their budget. We haven't got another town that's coming in with us that we know of that's going to fail the budget. And as Ben said, we can fail the budget for the school, but we're going to have to come back and pass it because there's not another town that's not going to support it. So that's the reason.
Thank you. So, what I would like to suggest is that we, number one, meet next week, and number two, that we speak to the warrant articles. Are those in the draft form that they were submitted to the board on Monday? Are they okay to submit to the finance committee?
Yeah, I
Or
can
do
send you
they have to be buttoned up, or are they okay, or?
I can send you a slightly revised one, Mark.
Okay.
The legal has it right now.
Yeah.
I anticipate having it back by midweek, but I don't anticipate any major changes to it, other than I think there was the one typo where we forgot to actually say how long the rec members were appointed for, which we'll fix. But other than that, I think everything else the language is good to go. The last two articles, you're kind of voting in their nature anyway, and the language could change a little bit based on what legal comes back with.
Okay, so if you can get those to me, I'll send them in advance to you. There are 17 of them. I think 14 are finance articles. We need to vote on all of them, but in particular the finance. Some are light lifting, some are a little heavier. So if we can plan on having that meeting next Wednesday. And number 6 on our agenda, has that date with the auditors changed, or is it pending?
I believe Donna was working on it changing. I don't remember her sending
Okay,
an update on that piece. She's not in again till Monday.
Yep.
But I imagine, she hasn't said that it didn't change, so I would imagine it did.
okay.
One clarification I'd like to make for the warrant articles, so we don't go through this again, is we are just deciding on what we're not talking about changing them, we're We are just deciding whether we recommend them
Either
or
recommend
guidance
approval
for
or
you to
disapproval,
talk.
that's it.
Or take,
Cannot change them.
or you can take no action.
Yeah.
Right, exactly,
Or we could talk at the meeting about it.
right. But basically, it's recommend approval, disapproval. Wait to the meeting,
Yep.
or take no action. But we're not editing them or changing them
Yep.
or otherwise. So with that, being under 10:30, not even 9 o'clock, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there any old business, new business, other than Mr. Bagdis? Any members with old business, new business? None? The motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? We stand adjourned.